The Ohio Supreme Court will not hear the appeal of a Strongsville teen convicted of murder. Attorneys for Mackenzie Shirilla, now 20, argued the medical examiner improperly altered autopsy reports in her case. Shirilla was convicted of murder after crashing her car into a wall in 2022, killing her boyfriend and their friend.
The moment this decision came down, most people thought Mackenzie Shirilla's future had finally been decided. Another appeal rejected, another courtroom loss, another step toward spending the rest of her life in prison. But the deeper I dug into what actually happened, the less that explanation made sense. Because this wasn't just another appeal that failed. Something happened behind the scenes that almost nobody is talking about. And once you see it, you'll understand why this case is far more complicated than the headlines make it seem. The accelerator was pressed to the floor for 4.6 seconds. In that time, a Toyota Camry accelerated from a crawl to 100 miles per hour. It steered through two curves on an empty industrial road. It made a 142-degree turn, what investigators would later describe as a hard yank, and the brake pedal was never touched. Not once. When the car hit the brick wall, it split in two. Two young men died instantly. The only person who survived was the 17-year-old girl behind the wheel. Police initially thought it was a terrible accident, a young driver who lost control in the dark. Then they reviewed the surveillance footage, and the accident became a murder investigation. If you want to understand how a single night turned from a graduation party into a double homicide, stay with us, like this video, and subscribe to Crime Dive Network. July 31st, 2022. Strongsville, Ohio, just outside Cleveland. The air was thick with summer humidity, and the streets were empty. Mackenzie Shirilla was 17 years old. In her car were two passengers. Her boyfriend, 20-year-old Dominic Russo, and his friend, 19-year-old Davion Flanagan. The three of them had spent the previous evening at a graduation party. They smoked marijuana. They listened to music. By the early hours of the morning, most people assumed the night was winding down. Davion had told his best friend he loved him before climbing into the back seat. Dominic had sent his father a text saying the same thing. Neither of them knew those would be their final words. At 5:34 in the morning, a surveillance camera captured the Toyota Camry turning onto Progress Drive. The vehicle moved slowly at first. Then it accelerated, deliberately, progressively, through the curves, through the empty darkness. No swerving, no panic, no attempt to stop. At 5:36, the car crossed a T-split, went airborne over a curb, and slammed into the Plidco building at nearly 100 miles per hour. First responders described the scene as the worst crash they had ever witnessed. Officers reported hearing mumbling from the driver. Both passengers were pronounced dead at the scene. The event data recorder told a story that no medical theory could easily explain. The accelerator had been fully depressed for 4.6 seconds. The engine throttle sat at 100% until 1.6 seconds before impact, when the car went airborne over the curb. There was no mechanical failure, no evidence of a medical emergency at the wheel, and absolutely no braking. Someone had driven that car into that wall with full intention. The only question remaining was why. Dominic Russo and Mackenzie Shirilla had been together for years. The relationship was volatile. Friends and family described multiple breakup attempts by Dominic. Each one met with resistance. Just 2 weeks before the crash, during an argument on the highway, Shirilla allegedly threatened to crash the car with Dominic inside. A witness reported seeing a physical struggle and hearing those exact words. Prosecutors would later cite this as evidence of prior calculation. The defense would argue it was a misunderstanding taken out of context. Davion Flanagan was never supposed to be in that car. He had planned to go home with another friend that night. At the last minute, he changed his mind. He climbed into the back seat of a Toyota Camry, driven by a girl he barely knew. He was a former high school running back with college aspirations cut short by injury. He worked as a youth swim coach. He had plans to attend Barber College that fall. He was the oldest of 3 adopted children. And in the span of 4.6 seconds, every plan he ever made ended. The case went to trial in August of 2023. Judge Nancy Margaret Russo presided over a bench trial. No jury, just the law, the evidence, and a decision that would define what justice meant for 3 families. The courtroom was silent as the video played. The prosecution built its case on the surveillance footage and the data recorder. Vehicle dynamics experts testified that progressive acceleration from 0 to 100 miles per hour does not happen during a medical blackout. That steering through curves requires consciousness. That maintaining steady pressure on an accelerator while making no attempt to brake is physically inconsistent with unconsciousness. Assistant Prosecutor Tim Troop argued that this was premeditated murder. 2 young men executed in a moving vehicle by someone they trusted. Shirilla's defense offered a different explanation. They claimed she suffered from postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS, a legitimate disorder affecting blood pressure and heart rate. Her mother, Natalie, testified that Mackenzie had been diagnosed in 2017 and had experienced fainting episodes. The defense framed the crash as a tragic medical emergency, not a crime. But the prosecution dismantled the theory at every point. No medical professional provided an opinion stating that POTS caused this specific crash. The physical evidence contradicted a blackout scenario entirely. An unconscious person does not steer through curves. Someone who has fainted does not progressively accelerate over several seconds while maintaining steady pressure on the pedal and ignoring the brake. Judge Russo agreed. In August 2023, she found Mackenzie Shirilla guilty on 12 felony counts, including 4 counts of murder. Her words from the bench became the defining statement of the case. She called Shirilla literal hell on wheels. She said Shirilla had a mission, and she executed it with precision. She described the actions as controlled, methodical, deliberate, intentional, and purposeful. Then she delivered the line that ended any doubt about what had happened inside that car. This was not reckless driving. This was murder. Mackenzie Shirilla was sentenced to 2 concurrent life sentences with the possibility of parole after 15 years. She was sent to the Ohio Reformatory for Women in Marysville. And if anyone believed prison would bring reflection, the record proved otherwise. Since entering the reformatory, Shirilla has accumulated 36 disciplinary reports and was found guilty in 32. The violations paint a portrait of someone who refused to settle into remorse. Contraband turned up in her possession, including paint, craft supplies, jewelry charms, and medication not prescribed to her. State-issued clothing was found altered. During video visits with a former inmate, she exposed herself while her visitor displayed a sex toy. Over 100% unauthorized video visits were conducted with a non-approved guest using another person's name. In interviews from behind bars, she called herself a victim. Those who followed her conduct described her as remorseless, shameless, entitled, a young woman facing the reality of life in prison and refusing to accept it. But behind those walls, another battle was unfolding. Shirilla's original legal team filed a direct appeal in September 2023, arguing insufficient evidence and clerical errors. The 8th District Court of Appeals denied it 1 year later. The Ohio Supreme Court declined to hear the case in April 2025. The direct appeal was exhausted, but there was another path. A petition for post-conviction relief, a legal vehicle that allows brand new evidence to be introduced. New experts, new medical analysis, new testimony never heard at trial. In October 2024, a new legal team led by Eric Nemechek filed a PCR petition loaded with claims they called genuinely significant. Her new attorneys argued that Shirilla's original trial lawyers had provided ineffective assistance of counsel by failing to properly investigate and present expert medical evidence about her POTS diagnosis. A neurologist was reportedly ready to testify that elevated lactate and low blood oxygen levels were consistent with a loss of consciousness. Text messages allegedly flipped the narrative on the July 17th incident. Questions were even raised about whether the coroner's report had been modified without following proper protocol. It was a Hail Mary backed by medical experts, legal strategy, and months of preparation. Her team believed they had found the cracks in the foundation, that if a court would just hear the new evidence, the outcome might be different. They filed their petition and waited for justice to listen. What they did not know was that justice had already stopped listening, not because of the evidence, not because of the crime, but because of something so simple, so ordinary, that it sounds like fiction. Someone had miscounted the days on a calendar, and by the time anyone realized, the door had already slammed shut. I don't need to be rehabilitated. I'm the third victim. Those are the words of a woman serving 2 concurrent life sentences for double murder. Dominic Russo is dead. Davian Flanagan is dead. And Mackenzie Shirilla, convicted of intentionally driving her car into a brick wall at 100 miles per hour to kill them, calls herself the third victim. Not the driver, not the perpetrator, a victim. This is no longer a story about surveillance footage or calendar errors. This is a story about what happens when someone decides the verdict does not apply to them. If you want to see how that refusal is being documented inside prison walls, and what it means for the only future date that still matters, stay with us. Like this video, and subscribe to Crime Dive Network. The Ohio Supreme Court's final ruling had nothing to do with what Mackenzie Shirilla did after entering the Ohio Reformatory for Women in Marysville. The calendar error that destroyed her appeal was a legal technicality, but what she has actually been doing behind bars since August of 2023 is a separate conversation, and it is documented. Public records show Shirilla arrived at the facility on August 31st, 2023. For the first 9 months, her record was clean. No violations, no incidents. Then May of 2024 arrived, and the reports started. They did not stop. As of the most recent documentation, Shirilla has accumulated 36% conduct reports. She was found guilty in 32. The violations include 7 counts of being out of place, 6 involving contraband, 4 for disobeying a direct order, and 4 for violating institutional rules. But the specific incidents tell a sharper story. In October of 2024, a random bed search turned up altered state-issued pants, a fan belonging to another inmate, and 4 nude magazine pictures. She pleaded guilty. In January of 2005, a search found medication not prescribed to her. She disputed it. In April of 2025, staff documented over 100 video visits with a person who was not an approved visitor. She accessed them using a different name. The visitor was a released former inmate. 100 visits, not 1 or 2 mistakes. A systematic pattern of deception, using a false identity to circumvent regulations. In September of 2025, a conduct report described sexually explicit behavior during a video call. Staff documented that Shirilla exposed herself while the visitor appeared completely undressed on camera. She pleaded guilty. The penalty was a 60-day video restriction. Her most recent guilty finding was for refusing a job assignment, but the conduct reports capture behavior. The phone calls capture belief. In a verified recorded prison call with her mother, Shirilla complained about being bored. She said she doubted anyone would give her a job because of her charges. Except records confirm she was employed as a food service worker, earning up to $24 a month. The complaint did not match reality. What she said next mattered more. She told her mother she planned to be a life coach. A life coach? From someone serving life for double murder. Someone with 32 guilty findings in under 3 years. Someone planning a public-facing career built on a story she was convicted of creating through intentional violence. In a separate verified call, Shirilla said she did not need to be rehabilitated. Then she called herself the third victim of the crash. The disconnect is staggering. 2 young men died instantly. The person convicted of murdering them has reframed herself as a casualty. There are also allegations from a former inmate who spoke to the press. She claimed Shirilla, while allegedly under the influence of a synthetic drug inside the prison, spoke about the crash in disturbing terms. She alleged Shirilla attributed the crash to the devil and said there was a reason Dominic had to die. She also stated she never witnessed anything resembling a medical episode. These are allegations from a single source and have not been independently verified. But they align with a documented pattern of deflection and refusal to take responsibility. While Shirilla has been living out that pattern, Dominic Russo's sister, Christine, has been fighting a different battle. Christine has told reporters her brother's murderer has been obsessed with herself and social media fame from the beginning. She pointed to something specific. Right after the crash, while still hospitalized from the collision that killed 2 people, Shirilla was making TikToks. Within hours, still injured, already creating content. So Christine launched Dom and Davon's Law. It modernizes Ohio's Son of Sam statute. The current law prevents convicted violent criminals from profiting off their crimes. Christine argues it does not go far enough in the age of social media. Sponsorships, crowdfunding, merchandise, paid appearances. She wants to ensure that if Shirilla ever walks out of prison, she cannot turn her story into revenue. Think about the irony. Shirilla is in Marysville working for $24 a month, telling her mother she wants to be a life coach. She starred in a Netflix documentary that was the platform's most watched title for 2 consecutive weeks. She achieved exactly what Christine accused her of wanting: fame, attention, a platform. Christine told reporters her brother is never coming back, and she will not stop until this becomes law. She also said there is a fine line between defending your kids. They created a monster. With every state-level door closed, what remains? Legal experts were direct. The one remaining theoretical avenue is a federal habeas corpus petition. It allows someone who believes they are unlawfully held to challenge detention in federal court. But the bar is far higher than state post-conviction relief. You cannot argue insufficient evidence or a missed deadline. You must demonstrate an actual constitutional violation. The most obvious argument is ineffective assistance of counsel, the same claim never examined because of the filing error. But habeas relief is rarely granted. No federal petition has been publicly announced. Could any of this, the appeal exhausted, the violations mounting, the documentary audience watching, finally make Shirilla reckon with July 31st, 2022? From everything documented, the answer does not look like yes. She called herself the third victim. She said she does not need rehabilitation. She is planning to be a life coach. But that question matters beyond how it feels. Ohio parole boards do not just look at time served. They look at genuine insight, genuine remorse, genuine change. A woman who enters a 2037 parole hearing still calling herself a victim of the crash she caused, still planning a public career built on that story, carrying 32 guilty findings, is not a profile that gets a board to say yes. Judge Russo said as much at sentencing. Nothing since suggests the trajectory is changing. Dominic Russo and Davian Flanagan do not get a 2037 hearing. They do not get a second chance. The question is not whether Shirilla will serve time. She will. The question is what she does with it, and whether she has earned the second chance she is asking for. Dom and Davon's Law is moving through the Ohio State House. October 2037 will be a moment this audience will want to witness. Shirilla will face her first parole hearing. The families will be there, and every violation, every quote, every documented choice will be part of what that board weighs. If you want to be here when that hearing happens, when the law moves, when the next chapter unfolds, subscribe to Crime-A-Dive Network and turn on notifications. This story started with a car splitting in two at 100 miles per hour. It continued through a trial where a judge called the defendant hell on wheels. It survived an appeal destroyed by a single day on a calendar. And now it lives in two places: a prison cell, where a convicted murderer calls herself a victim, and a state house, where a sister who lost her brother is making sure accountability does not end with a conviction. We'll be watching, and we'll bring you every development.